3 to my emetophobia story and how I was able to beat it. So, fantastic! I had stopped the pill and the nausea had gone. However, my anxiety was still incredibly high. I had experienced this crippling nausea for 6 months, a long amount of time, so my body kept expecting it to be there. My eating was getting back on track, but I still wasn't able to leave the house. My mum told me of an old friend she had talked to who had started learning to be a hypnotist and wanted to, very kindly, offer me a course of sessions for free. For the last 6 months, I had been listening to my tape, but it obviously hadn't been working because I was getting worse. Now I know that, of course, it wasn't working because the pill was causing all the problems. It was making the nausea unavoidable. By this point, I was starting to get my strength back, and I was ready to tackle the rest of the anxiety. I felt strong enough to try and beat its ass into the ground. Around the same time, a Godsend appeared. I cannot even stress how good the timing was here. Earlier in the year, before taking the pill, I had been recommended by a friend to a place called Bristol Wellbeing Therapies. They're a business funded by the NHS that advises and helps people suffering with mental health problems, for free. I wondered whether they would be able to help with my emetophobia, and emailed them with my problem. They told me to contact them, and scheduled me in for a phone assessment a month later. It was a long process. A month later, they called back, and I spoke to a woman about my emetophobia. I told her all about London, that it was something that I'd always dealt with, that it had made me suicidal, etc. She asked me some scaling questions to judge how bad my mentality was. For example, from 1 to 10, if you were in this situation, how far would you try to avoid it, etc. And at the end of the conversation, advised that I should be put into an intensive 12-session course of one-on-one CBT. She said that she would put my case out to all available BWT outlets, but because there was a long waiting list, it might take 6 to 12 months for someone to take up my case. If it was going to make me better, though, I was willing to wait. So, fast forward 6 or so months over the hellish nausea, the bench, the stopping of the pill, and now currently not knowing how to get myself out of the house to deal with my overpowering emetophobia, anxiety, and I get a call from Bristol Wellbeing Therapies. They tell me that someone has taken my case and that my first session will start immediately. I was so happy to know that I'd be in the hands of someone who could help. So, my weeks that usually went by without stepping outside the house now included CBT on Tuesdays and hypnotherapy on Fridays. It was getting me out the house, kind of, being driven from one building to another. But it was still terrifying, at first. My CBT sessions started off with talking about my past emetophobic experiences. The therapist was trying to pinpoint exactly how this had started. It was hard, though, talking back through the various experiences, and I found myself getting into quite a few panic attacks over the first couple of sessions. At some point, I suddenly remembered the jogging incident, see part 1, and told her. She wrote whilst I talked, and when I finished, she said, "I'm glad you've told me that. Doesn't that make sense, though?" And although I hadn't given the incident a second thought, I realised how everything was connected to how my emetophobia was now. During the jogging incident, I was filled with terror and had been running away from the creepy guy to get back to my safe house, at the same time as being incredibly nauseous, coupled with my brain telling me that I was going to be sick because I was so overexerted from running, and then I got in and gagged violently. In comparison, every time I felt slightly sick, the same utter terror would appear out of nowhere, and I would suddenly get the compulsion to run away as fast as I could, preferably to home, so that I could hide and be safe. Also coupled with my brain telling me that I was absolutely going to be sick because that's what happened last time, so of course it was going to happen again. Once we had pinpointed where my fear was coming from, we started to talk about coping strategies and mindfulness. We started to build up mental and breathing tools that I'd be able to use. See Distraction Tools video. Then we learned what my brain was really telling me. The root of my emetophobia anxiety was that my brain was constantly telling me that I was going to be sick, and I was believing it. That's the thing about anxiety, it's the what if. What if this happens? So that even if you tell yourself you'll be fine, your brain still says, but what if? And this makes you uncertain. For a whole year, my brain had been telling me that I would be sick if I did this or that. If I went out the house, if I ate too much food. It had been telling me this for years, in fact, right back in my school days. If someone was sick, I would think I'd also be sick. If someone was contagiously ill, I would think I'd also catch it and be sick. Even though all of these things never happened, my brain was constantly telling me that they might. And if you're told something enough times, you start believing it. Now we knew what to work with, we began the gradual exposure. And this was what eventually got me better. We had to prove my brain wrong, prove that I wouldn't be sick, and reverse the way it was thinking. And it's incredibly simple. We'd set up tasks for me to do. We drew a ladder, and at the top of the ladder I'd put goals that I'd like to finally achieve. such as being able to take a train and stay with my boyfriend, or being able to go out of the house for 3 or more hours without freaking out, or be able to eat a whole meal at a restaurant without freaking out, etc. We'd then take one of these tasks, and she would ask me what I'd need to do to achieve that task. I'd say that I'd need to walk around outside the house, I'd need to catch a bus, I'd need to catch a train, etc. She would then get me to write the task down. First, I would write what I had challenged myself to do. Then, I would write what I thought would happen when I did it. I would then write a percentage on how certain I was that this would happen. My first task was to walk 10 minutes to the shop at the top of the road and get sushi. Sushi was to be my reward. It was important to reward myself, apparently. It was a routine I'd do now and again before I was housebound, but now, walking 10 minutes up the road seemed like an Everest hike. I wrote that I would walk to the shop, then I wrote what I thought would happen, which was that I would be sick somewhere along the way, be unable to cope, and then be stranded with no way back. My percentage that this would happen was 95% certain. Strangely, the first time I tried to walk there, I managed to get all the way there without too much bother, but I couldn't go inside the shop. I turned around to walk back, and suddenly realised how very, very far away from the house I was. Bearing in mind that I hadn't left the house in a month and a half, so this was the furthest I'd walked since, I began to panic. I was completely alone, no one to help me, nowhere to hide. The walk back was too long, stranded. But I made myself walk back. I made it. And I was completely fine. A bit frazzled and scared, but fine. It knocked me back a bit, so I left it a couple of days until I was ready to try again. The next time, I only went half the way this time, so that it wasn't so testing. I realised then that trying again wasn't so bad as the first time. Because it was something I'd already done, I knew what to anticipate, and it wasn't as frightening. Doing these tests, I began to realise something. Something that I still tell myself to this day as a confidence booster. The second time will never be as bad as the first. Amazingly, it only took a couple of tries, maybe 4 or 5, until I was able to make it all the way to the shop, go inside, and buy my sushi. Oh my goodness, I tell you, walking through the shop doors literally felt like I'd passed a finish line. Such a small thing, but I felt like fireworks had been going off. It was the best feeling of accomplishment ever, and it made me more confident to do more. The good thing about doing these tasks was that it put all the smaller things into perspective. So, because now that I could walk those 10 minutes to the shop, it meant that going around the corner from my house to the cafes was no problem at all. We continued to build up the exposure experiments, and at the same time it was giving me the confidence to do other things outside of CBT, so that when I went back, I'd have something new to tell her that I'd managed to do that week. Don't get me wrong, I did have down weeks, and it was annoying. I'd feel like I was getting better, and then now and again things would slip back. I brought this up at CBT, and to my surprise, she said that this was a good thing. She told me that if you're getting better, but have small setbacks along the way, you can learn from those setbacks and pick yourself back up. Whereas, if you did great the whole time, and then suddenly had a setback at the end, the fall would be much greater, and you wouldn't know how to cope. She was absolutely right. Every time I fell back, I learnt how to pick myself back up. I learnt how far I could push myself. I learnt what to do if I knew I was going over the edge. My panic attacks got shorter, because I knew how to cope and get rid of them. Then, because of that, I began to fear the panic attacks less. Alongside CBT, I also found out about the website Emetophobia Resource. It's a free online resource for self-gradual exposure. I was hesitant to try it at first, because I was worried that it might trigger me or be too much. But I quickly realised that that wasn't the case at all. There are 12 levels of ascending emetophobia exposure, and you just go at your own pace. On the beginning levels, it's just words, then paragraphs, then funny pictures, etc. On the very last levels, you have videos and sounds, but you work your way up and only do them when you're absolutely sure you'll be able to cope. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I thought this video would be the last part of my story, but there is more to come. Doing CBT, hypnotherapy, and the Emetophobia Resource website did genuinely help, and for 2 full years I was able to be a human being and live a normal life without fear. However, things have since changed, and I have come to learn more about what's been going on inside my brain. But that's for another video. What I can tell you though, is that currently I am in a wonderful place, and I still maintain the fact that you can get better.